All right, well, then I'll kick it off.
Yeah, you kick it off.
Well, first, Logan, I would like...
Wait for me to get seated, Mike. I'm going to look embarrassed if I don't sit down properly.
Do your makeup.
Yeah, I got to do my makeup. We're probably pretty shiny because it's hot out there today, buddy.
It's a little hot in here, too.
I'll tell you what I want to talk about.
I would love to talk about what you want to talk about because I always...
Because you said you didn't have an idea, and so I have a little bit of an idea. Let's talk about the 4th of July, which happened just a little while ago. And like we're recording this just a couple days after the 4th of July. But I think that it will air later, and so people will be confused. But that's okay. People can be confused. Time is fluid. Time is an illusion.
It's the most important holiday for you.
But one of the things I was going to say is, so I went out for the 4th of July to see fireworks, because that's what you do on the 4th of July, right? And I went to the George Mason Memorial, which if you're in the D.C. area, I highly recommend. The George Mason Memorial is just behind the Jefferson Memorial by the Tidal Basin, and nobody knows it's there. And George Mason was a cool guy, and so it's never crowded. It's always cool. And I went out there to watch the fireworks, which it turns out to be is a great place to watch the fireworks from because you're like right underneath them. And there was this family there. They're like big family, like 10 or 20 people, huge family.
I love it.
And they were all Indian, and they were wearing their beautiful like saris and Indian garb and stuff. And they were practicing cricket. They had a cricket bat and a cricket ball, and they were knocking it around. That's intense. And it was pretty funny. And I happen to love cricket, so I was very excited to see this. But they were wishing people happy 4th of July, you know? And I guess they were probably like second generation or maybe a mix of first and second generation immigrants because the kids spoke without an accent. And I was just like, it made me so happy to see people celebrating America and freedom from a different background, you know, who weren't necessarily born here, who love it. And I really think that the hard right is making this big mistake being anti-immigration. You know, they say we can't let people come across our borders because they're going to pollute our culture and they're going to bring communism with them and they're going to take our jobs and they're going to take our welfare. And it's like, I don't know. I just don't see it. Like the immigrants I see are happy to be here and they love this country and they're contrasting it with the kind of socialist regimes of their home. And it's beautiful and it's great to see. And they're contributing and they're like working and starting businesses and having jobs. And all the like anti-American hatred that I see, which I see a lot of, it's all coming from white American born college students and professors, you know, who were spent their whole lives here and they have nothing to contrast it with and compare it with. And they just see, this is all they've ever known. And they see injustice because there's injustice everywhere. And they think, there's injustice, therefore it must be the fault of America and other places must be better and we have to tear down America. And I think that's crazy, but I think that it's homegrown. It's coming from our own institutions. It's not coming from the immigrants. And I think that the conservatives are really making a mistake being anti-immigrant because the immigrants are the ones who really value what America stands for, as far as I've been able to tell. What do you think?
No, I think that's a great thought, and you certainly emotionally caught me in there with the story. I'm picturing this family in my mind.
I have some video of them. I'll show you later.
I would love to, especially cricket is an intense game. I used to work with a South African who told me his mother let him play rugby, but would not, thank you for the more port, let him play cricket because she thought it was too dangerous.
It is kind of dangerous. The ball is really hard. Yeah.
But,
if you get hit by it, it hurts.
I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of that family, so I'm going to make a lot of assumptions here.
I mean, I don't know anything about them.
But they came out for the 4th of July. First and second generation, we're assuming first and second generation immigrants. They're wishing everyone happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day. They have no lineage back to the Mayflower, to the Revolution, to the Civil War, to World War II with America. But clearly they displayed a love and affection for our nation.
Yeah.
And to your point, I actually just watched, like, the question I always ask is, like, why do they have that affection compared to these white Americans who probably could have never done their genealogy, probably could trace themselves back really far into American ancestry. I just saw a campus reform video floating around social media, which is done by the Leadership Institute, and I'm sure they cherry-picked who was going in this video, but they were obviously asking, are you proud to be American? Of course, everyone on the video said no.
Yeah.
I'm sure they had a plenty of kids who said yes, and they just weren't, obviously you're not for the point of the video.
Mm-hmm.
But, the point, all of them are, well, there was some white and some, black, brown, Arab, Asian, whatever, all different types of people that were answering the question. All of them said no. They weren't proud to be an American. But this family, I think that the key thing there for this family, for me, is a lot of these immigrants come over as families.
Yeah.
And if you have a good family and you are bonded together, and a lot of these immigrants are very entrepreneurial, and they come here and they're going to start a business, and they're actually going to create wealth for America, because apparently the GDP is all we care about if we're a politician or a bureaucrat. And they have a deep love of it for this country, because I had an opportunity here. I get to spend time with my family here. I get to build my culture here, which is our family culture here. I love this country. And I think for a lot of the white Americans, or people that have been here for generations, regardless of color, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So we're not patriotic, because there's nothing emotionally that ties us. When you think of America, what do you think about?
Hamburgers.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about
I like hamburgers.
What makes me emotional about this country is just my childhood.
Yeah.
Everything my parents gave me.
Well, it's a lack of perspective, right? They don't have anything to compare it to. They've never lived in another country. They don't know what it's like to live in I don't know, what's a bad country?
Yeah.
They don't know what it's like to live in India. I mean, nothing against India. I'm sure it's a beautiful country, but it's overcrowded, and it's poor, and there's still slavery being practiced there, and there's all kinds of horrible things going on in India. And they've never lived there, so they don't know what it's like. They've never lived in a country that like Venezuela, where it's socialist and there's not enough food to eat. So they think that everything bad they see is a product of America and is unique to America, because they just don't know any better. And I think so many problems in our society could be fixed with more perspective on both historical, kind of going back in time, and then geographical, going around the world and seeing the way other people live. Mm-hmm. Because there's this idea of poverty in America, and they're like, oh, we have to deal with poverty in America. And there's people who have a hard time in America, but in terms of global poverty, the poorest people in America are doing great compared to the people who are poor around the world. People who are literally starving to death in other countries, the people who all they ever do is die of starvation and disease. We don't have that here. I have a friend who kind of went insane and moved to California to be homeless because he wanted to do that. I don't know why. But he's fine. He's got a laptop. He doesn't have any income. He's got a laptop. He's, eating well, and he's fine. And you can't do that in most countries. There's not enough wealth to pull that off, to have no income, no job, no productivity, and still just be fine. And you can do that in America, and people don't know that. So they think, oh, the poor in America have it so bad. And then, I don't want to minimize the suffering of people who are having a hard time in America, but this, compared to the poor in Africa, it's nothing. It's nothing bad. It's so much better. And we've made so much progress. And I just don't think people are able to see that because they have a lack of perspective. And then, talking about the historical perspective, people weren't alive 100 years ago. If you were alive 100 years ago, you'd see how much better off we are now. But there's this idea going around that, we don't have it as good as our grandparents. We're never going to be able to afford to buy a house. We can't afford to buy a car. We can't afford all these things our grandparents had. It's well, you can afford hot water. Your grandparents often couldn't afford hot water. So, people don't know that stuff. Things are much better than they were 100 years ago. But people don't know because they weren't alive then, and no one tells them, and they don't read books. So having a better perspective on, what life used to be like and what life is like around the world really makes you grateful for what you have. And speaking of gratitude, I'm kind of monopolizing the conversation here. I'm sorry. I'll let you go.
No, I think you're hitting on a lot of things. I actually want to push back
when you said the proud to be American question, I kind of don't like that wording, because I don't think you should be proud of things you have no control over. You're proud of your achievements. You're proud of things you've done, And so being proud of where you're born or what your skin color is seems a little bit odd to me. And so I don't know how I would answer that question. I would rather phrase it I'm grateful to be American, or something like that. Or I'm happy to be American, because I'm certainly extremely grateful to be American. I think it's winning the lottery of life is being born in America. But I wouldn't say I'm really proud of it, because I didn't do anything. I was just lucky, Being proud of being lucky seems like an odd thing to do to me.
I like that. I like that you made it gratitude in a way. Hey, I won the lottery. I don't know who decided that Logan would be born in America and not sub-Sahara Africa, or cave in the Middle East, or in sub-Sahara Russia.
Sub-Saharan Russia?
Or whatever.
I don't think that's a thing.
Siberia.
Yeah, okay.
Siberia, Russia. Sub-Sahara Africa. Yeah. Siberian Russia. Wherever it is that you could have, obviously popped out of the womb and been like, oh, this is going to be a little different.
Yeah.
Instead you're just born in, the greatest country, economically ever. I like that, the gratitude side of it. I think that would be a better way to phrase it.
I think so. I don't know to what extent people were responding to that question because they don't like the word proud and they have a problem with that. Probably not very many, but that's how I would respond to it. Is I would say I'm not really proud to be American, but I'm certainly happy to be American, and I'm certainly thankful to be American.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit, and I don't know if we'll disagree here.
Sure.
I do agree with we are better off. This is the best time to be alive ever.
Even Barack Obama said that.
In the history of the world.
Yeah.
And we definitely overlook that as a society. Like, there's a nostalgia to pick your favorite time in history that you romanticize, and you obviously overlook people dying in the street, disease, lack of sewage.
They don't show that in Hollywood films, in period films starring Keira Knightley. They don't have
the women are beautiful. I always joke.
They don't have all the diseases and all the filth and the feces on the streets and all the horrible stuff that was going on back then.
There's a show I used to watch with my wife on the Hallmark Channel, and it was supposed to be in the Rockies in Canada, in some startup mining town, and everyone, the men and women, are all beautiful. The streets are never muddy. They're perfectly paved. Everyone's happy. The children are just obviously beautiful. People make beautiful children. It's a model town on the Hallmark Channel. Wind Calls the Heart, if anyone interested. And me and my dad would just make fun of it. No, these people should have crooked teeth. No one shave their legs. But it's the nostalgia for the period. But I do want to pivot.
Yeah, what was it you wanted to quibble with me about?
Yeah, I don't know if appreciation, gratitude for a country, or patriotism, whatever you want to call it, where you live, opportunity can be truly be captured just on material means. Hey, you have more wealth than anyone else. I don't know how much we actually care about that, where I think it's more about your intimate community that matters. Do you have a loving family, whatever that looks like? Do you have good friends? Did you have a happy upbringing? Do you have a good marriage and family now? Whatever it is, I think that's actually more key. I have no idea that family at the fireworks, what their finances were. In Washington, D.C., maybe they were super well off, hardworking immigrants, assuming they're doing all right, but they could have been dirt poor. And I don't know if... I think the love in a family and a community is a more important variable in patriotism, love of country, gratefulness, than is just, I have access to wealth. I mean, probably Matt and Terry can attest to.
Well, I agree with that partially.
They know a lot of wealthy people.
But remember that wealth isn't just stuff. Wealth isn't just possessions. People tend to think, wealth is the stuff you own. Wealth is the ability to care about other things because you're not worried about dying, Wealth is the ability to care about the environment because you're not worried about starving to death. Wealth is the ability to spend more time with your family because you're not worried about, your roof caving in next time it rains. Wealth is time in a lot of sense. And wealth is other things that are important because it's an opportunity cost, right? If you don't have that money, then you're constantly scrabbling to try to prevent all these bad things from happening to you. And if you have the wealth, then you can prevent those things from happening to you with the money instead of with the time. And you can use that time for more fulfilling things. So to that extent, I think that wealth is important. But I also agree that there's definitely a spiritual and a familial and a relationship basis to patriotism and happiness in general as well. And you need that regardless of how much money you're making. But I think it's easier to capture some of that stuff if you don't have to worry about, where your next meal is coming from.
Yeah, I think if we're currently the best off we've ever been, which I accept and agree with, but we also are declining in patriotism. That means you would have to accept the argument that if you go back in time, you're going to find a more patriotic culture.
Correlation is not causation.
That's true, but I'm going to try to make a causation.
Right.
You would think if the two were correlated, patriotism would drop, and as wealth increased, patriotism would go up. Mm-hmm. But it's not the case here. Wealth's gone up, patriotism has gone down, so the two have separated.
Right.
Which begs the question, how our economic material, access to economics, greater access to material means, does that equate to greater patriotism? It doesn't seem so.
Well, no, it doesn't seem so. But it also doesn't mean that greater access to material means necessarily causes less patriotism. It doesn't mean that those things are causally related. There does seem to be a correlation there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they're causally related. And I don't know whether they are or not. They might be. But I would suspect that there's other factors at play.
Yeah.
And like I think a lack of perspective.
But if there's no causation, would it undermine your argument that, hey, you should appreciate America because you have access to modern everything that no one else ever had in history? Like,
no, you still should. You still should appreciate America.
You
because
should
of those
still
things.
appreciate it, but should it cause?
I think it's an issue of complacency. Like if you don't know anything else, like people have had it so good for so long that they don't realize how good they have it. Whereas in earlier generations, people could see the progress happening. They could see the difference between them and their parents. They could see the difference between them and just a few years ago. And they're like, oh man, like, we had the Great Depression and then we came out of the Great Depression and the Great Depression was really bad and now we're better off. So we can be grateful for that and feel patriotic. Whereas now people don't know anything but prosperity. That's all they've ever known is prosperity. And so I think that's the problem.
I think a lot of people would agree with that. They say like the only thing that's going to get us back on track is like a crisis. And you think 2020 might have been a crisis. But something worse. Something close to the 1930s.
Hard times build strong men build build good times build weak men, and weak men build hard times.
Where are we?
I don't know. That's a good question. Like I kind of feel like we're at the weak men are building bad times thing.
Yeah.
And then the bad times will build strong men in the future. Oh. But yeah, I think it's this cycle we see over and over again.
From a patriotic, so I'm a big Civil War history buff, and I was reading about recently German units that fought for the Union, mostly under Grant and Sherman out west. But these were all German-speaking units, and they faced a lot of bigotry because people just didn't trust the German immigrants, even in the 1800s. But they
knew what was coming.
They decided some were conscripted. A lot of them volunteered and were like, I'm going to fight. And if you look at all of their past letters that I was looking at, a lot of them came over from Germany. Did not exist at that point in time. It was Prussia. And they said, I left a pretty crappy situation over in Europe to come here for a new opportunity. And I'm not going to let it dissolve.
Yeah.
Right now and then. And we can argue about who was right, who was wrong politically in the Civil War if you want to. I know people love that. But,
I don't want to.
But these people were, I don't know, were they patriotic? I mean, these German immigrants that faced a lot
They
bigotry.
weren't patriotic towards Prussia or Germany.
No, but they were like, I'm not letting America fall apart when I just got here to build something.
I mean, the other thing we have to take into consideration is we don't really know how patriotic people were 100, 200 years ago. Like, we know what was written in letters and we know what was, preserved in history books. But, like, if people were privately grousing to each other, I hate this country, it's no good, we wouldn't have any way of knowing that. No. So I think we tend to exaggerate how good things used to be. It's kind of like what I was talking about with the Hollywood films. We don't see how bad things used to be. And we probably don't see the kind of dissension and the quarreling and the dissatisfaction that people had in those times as well. There's probably a lot of people who are very unhappy with their situation and with the situation of the country. I mean, you had an entire half of the country secede from the Union because they were unhappy with the situation. So, like, I don't know that it's necessarily true to say that people used to be so patriotic and now nobody's patriotic anymore. Like, we don't really know how patriotic they were. We know how patriotic some of them were.
It's a very good point. I wonder, it's a different type of dissatisfaction with the government. I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but my perception is people are dissatisfied with the government because the government's not doing enough for me. I'm like, 150 years ago, you barely knew the federal government existed. So you obviously weren't wondering about
I think
your
150
stimulus check
years
hitting
ago,
your bank account.
I think 150 years ago, you might have been acutely aware of how big the federal government was. But, I take your point. I just think your time period was wrong.
Oh, trying to trace it back to 160.
Yeah.
I guess 160 years ago, or 1860.
Like, the federal government had just fought a war to preserve federal authority over the states. So you're probably pretty aware of that.
I mean, how often did you have to interact with the federal government?
Yeah.
160, 175 years ago, the mid-19th century.
Yeah.
Not so much. You weren't, it's a different probably complaint with the federal government. Yeah, we don't know, to your point. I can make assumptions and guess. And
I always hear this argument about political polarization and how nasty politics has gotten. And they're like, oh, politics is so nasty and people are so polarized and we used to be united. And then you go back and read like the 1820 election, maybe 1800 election, where between Jefferson, 1800 election between Jefferson and Adams, and it's like the nastiest, most personal attacks you've ever seen. Like, it's way more divided than we are now. It doesn't get preserved by history, and people don't know it, so we just assume that everything was good back in the past because you only see the good stuff.
Nothing's changed.
It's sort of like how you think the music used to be better because the music you hear from 50 years ago has survived the test of time, and all the bad music just like got forgotten. But the bad music existed. We just don't listen to it now. So we think all the music was good. Whereas 50 years from now, the good music we're producing now will be remembered and the bad music will be forgotten and people will think it was good. That's my music analogy.
Yeah, history's very kind, at least to the music industry.
Yeah.
If you're crappy music, you'll be soon forgotten. A luxury.
Mm-hmm.
If you're fantastic, you'll be remembered. Both. History's kind of both. I guess the winners and the losers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting that the patriotism or
talk about your article.
Yeah, I wrote
a patriot.
I wrote an article
recently came out on freethepeople.org.
Yeah, the article I wrote, and I've hit on a lot of the key points right now, is what makes a patriot, and a lot of it. And there was a comment immediately on Twitter because we just started.
Don't read the comments, Mike.
No, but clearly the person did not read the article.
Yeah, they never read the article. They read the headline, and then they respond as if they've read the article.
I want to make a strong difference between patriotism and nationalism.
Yes.
And I never mention nationalism.
I think that's very appropriate. They're not the same thing.
And patriotism that I want to hit on is an affair of the heart. It's a romance with where you came from, and very much where you came from. It has nothing to do with the geography, your race, your religion, any of that stuff. It has to do with, you think someone like, hey, where I come from, we work hard, we roll up our sleeves. That's all an ethics-based thing. I was raised with certain values. I treasure
its values and its culture.
Values and cultures. I value where I came from and what was instilled in me, these ethics and this culture, and I want to pass that on, and that's patriotism. And it's a romance, and you love it so much you want to give it to the next generation. Where nationalism is something so different than patriotism and so shallow. It's all about what you can't control, to what you mentioned. My skin color, my religion I was born into, the geography around me, the soil I was born on.
Yeah.
Like, you have no
blood
control.
Blood and soil.
Yeah,
that's what they used to say. The fascists used to say blood and soil.
None of that matters, really, because you had you spun the lottery wheel and you popped out somewhere.
Yeah.
And my question is, like, how do you build that love? And I think to that, the Indian family, it's all about just good people around you that are important to you, that gave you things that you appreciated and loved you in the right ways, and you come out of that and like, oh, I want to pass it on to my children.
That's what makes me feel patriotic, is seeing people out, enjoying the country and celebrating it and living their lives and being peaceful and happy and having a great family life. And seeing that family play cricket in front of the George Mason Memorial made me feel so like a swell of patriotism in my bosom, that like way more than the military parades and waving flags and all the stuff that people traditionally associate with patriotism. This Pledge of Allegiance, the national anthem, that's what America's about to me. It's the freedom of people to come here and start a new life and prosper and enjoy themselves and be free to do what they want to do.
In our conversation with John Schweppe, we kind of talked about just saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day. Like, maybe that helps a little bit, but that's nothing. Yeah. Standing up,
I don't like
kids arbitrarily say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I don't like
Maybe if you do that instead of saying I hate America every day, it's good. It's better on the margin.
The real problem with the Pledge of Allegiance, it's the phrase "and to the republic for which it stands." That's what annoys me the most about it.
Huh.
You
pledge allegiance down that rabbit hole.
You pledge allegiance to the flag. All right, I'm going to obey the flag. The flag can't really give me any orders, so that's fine. And to the republic for which it stands. It's not a loyalty to America. It's loyalty to the government of America.
Oh, that's a great.
It's a government loyalty pledge, and I really don't like that. I am not loyal to the government. I dislike the government. I want to abolish the government. So I'm not going to say that I am going to pledge my allegiance to the republic for which it stands, because my love of America, and I love America, I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. I think America is a great, great country. Is about the people and about the culture and about the values that which it was founded on. And it has nothing to do with the people sitting in the Capitol down the street and the people making laws and the president in the White House. It has nothing to do with the army. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with just the people getting on with their lives and not being oppressed and not being tormented.
I think it hits on to, and I've brought this up for the past whenever with you, whether it's been on this podcast or in private conversation. Whenever I watch, whether this was actual conversations that happened or not, but whenever I watch military movies, typically I picture World War II movies where they're all marching along and sloshing through the rain and the mud, and they're talking like, oh, why did you sign up, blah, blah, blah. It's never about like, oh, for my country, oh, for the government. It's, oh, because my brothers back home did it, or my neighbors did it, or it's a fight for Little Rock, Arkansas, or wherever it is. It's something to do with hearth and home, and the people. And, like, I want to get my best friend home safe, who's also in this unit. Whatever it is, it never has anything to do with the Republic.
Right.
I love the idea of republicanism, little r. I think it's the least worst kind of government we've figured out so far to this point. But yeah, it has nothing to do with the Republic. It's a good point. I went to a private school where we did a Pledge of Allegiance to. It was a Baptist school. The American flag, the Christian flag, and the Bible.
What is the Christian flag?
I can't remember.
I've never seen the Christian flag.
It's blue square, like the American blue square with a cross in it, and then all white. And it's supposed to be like, white is the purity of Jesus. The red cross is the blood of Jesus. And I cannot remember what blue meant.
It's probably the sky.
Something weird. And then there's pledges.
That's interesting. I did not know about the Christian flag.
I'll have to look up the pledge. Every day, 1st through 8th grade, I had to do those 3 pledges.
Yeah.
And I cannot remember the Bible or the Christian one.
Well, this is a sort of a tangent from what we were talking about, but loyalty is something that has to be chosen. Loyalty is meaningless unless it's chosen. You have to choose it yourself. And like enforcing loyalty on people, I think that's a terrible idea. You can't make people loyal by forcing them to recite a pledge over and over again. They have to like feel it in their heart and be like, that's what I believe in and that's what I'm going to be loyal to. Those are the people I care about. I'm going to be loyal to my family. I'm going to be loyal to my friends. I'm going to be loyal to my boss, whatever it is. That comes from within. And like trying to just make people assert that because you make them repeat a pledge over and over again. I don't know. Doesn't work for me.
I think you can be loyal to your country, but that derives from the local stuff or the communal stuff. Because I think you could take an economic analysis to it, which I will save, but I think of the Scottish clans. They used to swear an oath to their laird, which is the Scottish word for lord, their fidelity and obedience. And if you didn't, you could be killed. Right. So you did it.
It's kind of meaningless as an oath if you're just doing it because you're afraid of being killed.
The people did take it. I mean, I don't know. I guess you'd have to go back in time, but it seems like there was a strong cultural allegiance to your laird. And, the economist in me wants to look at it from like a rational choice perspective. Like it's making sure everyone cooperates and no one, these are smaller groups in a country. This is just a large plantation with a lot of families on it.
Right.
And they're all trying to, we need to cooperate or we're all going to get wiped out. So you had to find ways to ensure cooperation. But culturally, they had a lot of other institutions that help build that loyalty to your laird and your clan. I don't think you have patriotic people by taking a Pledge of Allegiance every morning in grade school. It's nice. It looks cool, I guess, maybe. But
I find it looks a little creepy personally.
It means nothing to you if you don't have that.
Like the children don't even know what it means, They don't. It doesn't mean anything to them. They're just doing it by rote because they're forced to.
The United States of America. But as I get older, and I think about America, I think about my home.
Yeah,
that's all. That's what it means to me. I think about my friends, my phone, my family, my phone. Just my phone.
Yeah, your phone is becoming an increasingly important part of your loyalty to the country.
But
I love this country because it's the country that gave me my phone.
Smartphone. Thanks, sweatshop in China.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about China another episode.
Let's do China another episode.
Yeah. Cheers, sir.
Cheers. Thank you, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Enjoyed it always.
As always.